Welcome to Nanaimo Yacht Charters. We're standing on the main dock, and here on my left is Kalakala. Kalakala, directly translated, means the small bird, Kalakala, or Kalakala as the locals call it. It is a Beneteau 34, and it's a lovely little boat with a full cockpit enclosure, and it has a stack-away main. In other words, it has lazy jacks and very easy to handle. The sail just cascades into that, and that's where it stays. Well, let's walk onto the boat and we'll show you how things work. Right, and here we are on the transom of Kalakala, and you can see that in the transom we have hot and cold shower with a shower head that's buried in there, and of course this is where the shore power connection is. Now it's got a smart plug, which means that different to the standard shore power plugs, you've got these two tabs on either side that you actually depress, and if you like to come around and have a look here, you'll see that there are two tabs that get pressed, and it's not a twist. You actually depress the tabs and pull it out, and when you put it back, you just push it straight in, and you lock the lid with a convincing thunk like that, and it's locked. But do remember to undo it, because it will be attached to a pedestal, and if you come over here, we'll show you. There it is, in there. Okay, now that is a twist lock, it in and twist, and that locks it in place. Right, and we're now going to step aboard. We're going to start the engine, but before we do this, notice that mounted very conveniently here is your barbecue, but I do ask you to please take the panels away before barbecuing, or else it could be quite an expensive mess. Plus it's very bad for the steak. Right, we're going to step aboard. We're going to show you how to start the engine. Right, now the engine key is the round brass key, so we'll just stick that in there and twist that. Now with it twisted, that means we're in the start position. If you come over here, you're going to have to give yourself some throttle, and the way to give throttle is put the lever in at the 12 o'clock position and push that button down, and that will give you throttle only. Now look what happens when I move it back. You'll see the button will pop out, and that will come out. And if I select it forward now, it will be in gear. And the harder I push down, the more throttle I'll have. So let's just see how that all works. We'll come back to the 12 o'clock position. We'll be able to push that back in, give ourselves some throttle. That's throttle only because the button is being held in. And come over here, switch the key on, and then press the preheat. That noise will go away, and you hold it down. We're preheating now. And we preheat for about 10 seconds, so we give it another few more seconds, and then we simultaneously press the heat and the start button together. And there we are, we've started. Now whenever we start a diesel engine, we don't want it to run too fast. We must check to see if there's water coming out the exhaust. Let's step out and go and check that. Okay? Probably easiest to do it on the dock, but you can actually hear the exhaust running with water coming out. A good generous flow of water is coming out of the exhaust. Now that indicates that there's nothing wrong with the pump. If you're not getting water out of the exhaust, it will make a loud hollow sound, and what will happen is that the exhaust will begin to burn, because the exhaust is cooled by that water. So beware, must get water out of the out of the exhaust. Right, let's go down below. And here we have the key for down below, is the silver one. And you've got to be careful that if you push this in too far, you won't be able to turn it. So you have to be you have to hold it out a little bit. It's just a quirk with that lock. There we are. And now you can twist once and twist the second time, and it'll slide open. Never leave the key in there, because if somebody drops the board, it breaks the key off in there, which causes a bit of a problem. The two boards slot into each other, and that now gives us access to go down below. Right, access to the engine. You've got barrel bolt here on the bottom that you have to just undo. That's it. And then you can lift this up, and it doesn't come up very far, but it lifts it up enough to have a look inside the engine. Now, as long as the engine tray is nice and clean, then it means that you haven't dropped anything. So to get to the dipstick, it's better to actually take the little panel off the side, because the dipstick is on the left-hand side of the engine. But while you're in here, it's always a good idea to check the V-belts and make sure those are okay. And make sure that the water level on this plastic bottle up here has got water on it. And you can see there's half of the water in there. Okay. So with that, we're going to shut the steps down. Exactly the same. Just push them down and then drop that in here. Now when you go into the port cabin, that's where you'll get access to the dipstick. So I'm going to slide my way in there, and if you could peer around the corner, that would be a good thing. This is where the dipstick lives. So you just undo that, and that's exactly where you'll find the dipstick, down inside that hole, and I'm pointing to it. Can you see that? Okay, well done. So that's jolly good. And you'd take that out and you'd make sure that the oil level was absolutely right. And if you needed to top up oil, that's when you would dismantle the back here. So we're probably going to get you to clamber into the back there so I can take that box off and show you how to fill up oil. Go. So when you have a look here, you have a high bilge alarm that will switch on if it's squawking. You know you've got too much water in the bilge, but it will alarm you. That is off, and that's twist puts them back on again. That's your house battery, that's your start battery, and that's your emergency parallel right here, which combines both the house and the start should your batteries be flat. Over here you've got your diesel heater. Okay, so that's got to be on, and you just set the thermometer here, and the diesel heat will fire up, and it'll run at whatever temperature you've decided to select here. And if you look up there, you can see the temperature there. At the moment it's 59 degrees. So you'd run it up to probably 60 or 70, depending on how warm you want to be. Okay, so those are the batteries. You just leave everything as it is, because you can't flatten the start battery, because they are isolated. So that will help you, give you some peace of mind there. Now this is what we do to get access here. We lift this to open. So we lift that up, and it's held with Velcro, but it comes apart nicely. And if you peer down in here, you'll see the water strainer, and that's where the water that comes up before it goes into the engine is kept clean, so that you don't plug up with eelgrass and stuff like that. Okay. So that's a look in there, and that's really the most important thing, is how to access that. If it is plugged with grass, you're going to have to switch off the actual raw water inlet before opening this, and then when you open it, you can actually take the basket out, clean it, and put it back, and then don't open the through hole. You keep it shut, and then you fill this back up with salt water, or water from the kettle, doesn't really matter, and put that in there until it's nice and full. Then dog the lid back down again. Okay, and then only once the engine starts do you open up the raw water inlet. I'm going to shut this down, and I'm going to show you where the raw water inlet lives. Now, as you can see, we've had to take the big cushion up out of the aft cabin and the small board directly behind this section that you lift up to get access to the top of the engine. That is your raw water inlet. And sometimes that gets blocked from the outside with weeds, but it can also let some debris through which will block up the strainer which we showed you earlier. Now to shut that, all you do is crank that lever handle down so that it's actually parallel to the hole, and that shuts it. In that position now, it's open and you're getting a good flow of water. Right, we're sitting at the chart table. We'll just go quickly through stuff. This is your 12-volt DC panel from the house batteries. Very simply written, nav lights, anchor lights, steaming lights, you go all the way down. This switches your instruments on. So I'll switch those on so we can have a look up at the cockpit to see if they're working. That gives me our GPS and our depth sounder. And over here, bilge pump. You can hear the bilge pump running happily. It also has its own float switch and will come on if the water fills in there in any alarming quantities. This is your freshwater pump. With that on, you can now open the tap and get fresh water. Over here, we're looking at the refrigerator. We switch that on, and if you go across to the back of the left of the stove, you'll see the thermostat, which allows you to regulate and you can hear the on cue, the actual fridge starting up. This is the gas valve, which allows us to switch on the solenoid so we can use the stove and the oven. This is your stereo, that's your VHF. Let's go across to the fridge now and have a look so I can point out where the thermostat is. Right, there is the thermostat, and it's a simple matter of just turning it like that. And if you go all the way anti-clockwise, you switch it off. As you can hear, the fridge switched off. Come on the way on, and then it gets colder and colder until it's max, which is there. I would suggest that you have it about halfway, and that will give you a good cold fridge without running your batteries down too much. Now here's the stove. We've switched the bottle on in the cockpit, if you remember where that is. And over here are the buttons for each of the burners. So let's light that. I'm going to look for a stove lighter, and here it is right here. And to light the stove, it's best to get this part working first. So with that working, and you can see the designation, the white dot means that there is ready to be lit. Takes a little while for the air to come through. And there we are. So that's the air coming through, and then it'll burn in a nice steady flame. And once you've got the air up to the unit, the other one will light instantly. Like that. Okay, so those are your two burners on top. And then you can come down below here, and you can have the grill on. So you just lift that handle and pull it towards you, and the actual grill burner, I prefer to actually lift that out of the way so you can see what you're doing. So we put that in and twist it, and there you have your oven on. You have that? Right. So I'll let that go, and then switch it off, 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 and off. And then we'll put this back, and then just shut her up. Go. And over here is our gimbal lock, and that allows us to lock the actual stove in position. You undo the sliding bolt and you slide it away, and then lock it back up again, and now you can cook at sea, heaven forbid. Open that up and lock it back in, and then dog the little screw down like that, and that actually locks it in place where it'll probably be whenever you're cooking. This is our AC shore panel, AC power panel rather, and that gives you a switch from the shore power onto the boat, and you can see the top switch says AC main shore, so that must be on with the shore power plugged in. Now remember, when you disconnect that, it's best to switch that top switch off and then disconnect, and then you can connect it back up again when you've got it reconnected. This also controls the water heater, which is the next switch, which is off at the moment. But most importantly, the battery charger is on. And you can see that's on, and that means the battery is getting charged. The batteries are getting charged from the battery charger, which is on the boat. And that is from shore power. The last one is outlets, meaning plug points on the boat. There's one in the galley, and there's one in each head, in each cabin, and that's That's where that is. If you have a look across to your left here, you can see that there are filters and V-belts and tools and equipment for the boat. And that's where the fire extinguisher lives, in there. And in each hanging locker, you will have the life jackets. Right. So to pump the bilges electrically, you just flick that over, and you can hear it pumping away. Alright, it's also on a float switch, so that will come on if the water gets too high in the boat. This little center switch will show you condition of the batteries, and you can see they're almost up at 14.5 volts, so fully charged batteries. And here's the DC panel again, and the VHF is at the bottom, so we switch that on, and the radio will come into life. You can hit OK, and we are immediately in the WX channel. If you want to get out of the WX channel, you hit 16, and these can scroll up and down it. If you want to get back into the WX channel, scroll there at the bottom and hit that WX button, and now you're onto the WX feature. WX is your weather channel that gives you continuous weather in both French and English, and you have 10 channels. There's 8, 9, 10. They're all weather channels. It'll go back to 1 now. There's 1, 2, and there's your English. Switch off, you just rotate that all the way around and switch off, and then you can come back here and switch off the VHF. Yeah. And here we have access to the plumbing part of the boat. Over here is your shower drain pump and your icebox drain. If that handle is over there to the bow, that's your shower drain pump. So if you press shower drain pump, you press that will actually empty the shower drain. But first of all, we must have the switch on the panel. Now with the shower drain switch on the DC panel, you can come over here and make sure that that lever is pointing that way, and you can see there's a little drawing up there illustrating shower drain pump with the lever in that position. And if I use that toggle, you can hear it empty underneath where I'm kneeling, and that's the shower drain pump. Now if you want the icebox drained, all you have to do is pick that lever up, move it towards the transom. If you have a look, it's now towards the transom. Use the same toggle switch and you'll hear it emptying in the fridge. We've got a valve down there with a blue handle, and that particular valve is for the drain for this sink, the actual basin for the head. It's there. This one here is the discharge for the toilet. You have the macerator coming in here, and you have the actual toilet discharge there. Now if you want to pump out at sea, what you do is just press that button, and you'll hear the macerator pump, which is housed in this housing, pumping out. You can hear it. And it's now pumping fast and gurgling, means that the actual tank, the holding tank, is empty, and that's in here too. So you don't really need to touch any of the valves, but inside here around the corner is a grey valve, and in one position it pumps directly over the side, and in the other position it pumps up into the tank. So you would control that with this grey valve positioning around here. Now that position of that handle is positioned to pump straight over the side or into the macerator tank. Now if you just rotate that handle, I'm going to put my hand around the corner, I'm going to rotate that handle. Here we go. I'm just going to rotate it that way, and now it's in a different position. And can you see the arrow on the pump body? There is an arrow. Now that arrow describes the flow. So that arrow is going over the side, it's going in the overboard position. If I rotate it, you'll watch the arrow will expose a different flow. Can you see that? The arrow, that is going straight over the side. You can see the arrow there, and it's showing you that the flow is going overboard. So that's what you've got to look out for. In that position, it's going straight over the side, and in the other position, it's going into the holding tank. Right. Now this is a cavernous cockpit locker, and it holds a bunch of good stuff. Your toolkit's here in black, your fuel is all ready to go there, you have top-up oil and antifreeze. We have some floating line, there it is, on a bracket that goes on the transom. And we have the dinghy pumps, spare anchor and chain, and of course a seat for the dinghy itself. There is another fire extinguisher out here, a 7-pound fire extinguisher there. Now remember, there are 2 fire extinguishers on board. Alright, and now this, as we saw earlier, our propane locker, we're going to shut it off. Remember, when you're not using the stove, always shut off, and just make sure both bottles are firmly dogged down. This is the one connected. This is our bilge pump handle, which goes into there, and it can be used as a crew disciplining tool as well. We'll put it right there. Okay, now this has to shut first because of the lip on there. There we are, down it goes. And now this can come after. There we are, all in good shape. And go. And you'll notice on top of the spare bottle, we have the barbecue hose. Rather than use silly little bottles that have an annoying habit of running out as you're just about to cook your steak, or they could run out mid-steak, which is even worse. This hose goes straight into the bottle there, and then this end goes into the regulator on the side of the barbecue. Again, just to remind you to take these both screens off and the man overboard pole away so that you can have a clear, unfettered go at the barbecue. But that's your hose, there's plenty length for it, and you can plug straight in there and start cooking. Right, this is our anchor windlass remote. It lives in the chart table, and it's a simple up and down push button, and it's got a 3-pin plug. Now that 3-pin plug switches or gets put into place there. So I rotate it around, and you can only put it one way, and then you just screw it in with the threaded sleeve on the side. There we are. Now we've got that on, and it's nice and secure. Make sure that the wire doesn't go anywhere near the chain, because that's probably the end of that. So down, you press the down button, and up for the up button. It's as simple as that. You have 120 feet of chain, and you have about 60 feet of 3/4 inch nylon braid, and that's your anchor gear. I would always like that the engine's got to be started before it will work, and please don't leave the anchor. Please don't leave the anchor windlass control, this thing. Do not leave it in here because it won't last long. And if you look down into the chain locker, you'll see very clearly the yellow links. Now those yellow links are painted every 10 meters. So every 30 feet approximately, you're going to have yellow links, and that will indicate how much chain you have so you can have the scope set right. If you do transition from chain to rope, please, you have to help it through, because it won't transition easily. You'll have to move this pawl out the way, and you'll have to help the rope through the windlass so that you can deploy the rope as well. Generally speaking, there's so much chain you don't really need to use, you don't have to be on the rope. So if you do, please help it through. And don't forget, when you're working with the anchor windlass, to always tether, because if this comes down, especially if you're barefoot, you could quite easily lose a toenail. Thank you. Right, now we're going to shut the engine down. It's always important to let the engine idle for a few minutes, especially if you've been running it hard for any length of time. You want at least 2 or 3, maybe even 5 minutes of cool down time before you stop the engine. So let it idle, and then you grab the pull cable and you give it a good tug, and it will switch off, and then you can switch the key off. You'll always notice that with a key off, you won't have a fuel gauge working. So that's important. Over here you have an engine hour meter. So essentially speaking, you'll want to you'll want to make sure that you fill, even if the tank gauge is not working properly, you can still have the engine hour meter, and you should fill up after 30 hours of motoring. So what we're looking at here is the diesel fill point, never to be confused with the water fill point. You'll see that the little key pattern in there is much smaller than the winch handle one. The water is the full size, diesel is always the smaller size. And if you come up here, you'll see where the tank fill is. Clearly marked water, and with a much bigger pattern. You can see it, there you have it. That's very definitely the water. Right, and here we have a hybrid touch Raymarine GPS, and it's fantastic because you can actually change everything just by touching with your fingers, so it's a touch screen. And over here we've got our apparent wind angle and apparent wind speed meter, giving you the speed. It gives you the speed and the depth, which is excellent. And basically you can scroll up and down there, and there's a menu of a whole lot of options, so these are both very useful little instruments. Press the home screen, we can come straight in here and you'll see a little panel designated user manual. If you tap that, it has the full manual for the hybrid touch Raymarine on here. So there you have your manual. If you want to go back, hit the home screen again, and once more onto chart, and there we are. Thank you so much for watching our short video presentation. I do hope that this helps you on your trip. We sincerely hope that you have a great trip. If there are any questions that you have pertaining to the operation, you've also got the manual that you can refer to, and you can call me, 1-250-729-5592. Have a great holiday, and thank you for sailing with the Nanaimo Yacht Charters.